So I thought I'd show you this little project here that I'm part way through. Now what the guts of this is that I've got a set of backup batteries in the B shed that I'm going to add to the 24 volt system in there. A couple of really grunty car batteries. Well, they're like SUV batteries that I got second hand and they're still in really good nick. And I feel that adding those to that B shed will really help when we're doing the ovenies and baking cakes and stuff, when we need a little bit more grunt from the oven and the main battery bank doesn't quite have enough to get us there. And that's something I do want to say. I might go into it a little bit more when we go back into the next section, but a big thing that's helped us through the last winter this time is backup battery banks. The infamous 10 volt bank, just a proper 12 volt bank. I've even started putting together a so-called 8 volt battery bank now, which I'll make some separate videos about. I should have done that before broaching it on here, but you know, what the hell. But anyway, yeah, backup battery banks. I want to have a backup bank for every battery bank that I run because it has some outstanding advantages. It means you can keep the main banks smaller and just stacked up with really good quality batteries, which of course last a lot longer. And you've got a use for your sort of B grade, C grade, even D grade batteries. I don't know about D grade, but you know, certainly a couple of tiers down from being good batteries, you can get a lot more life out of them. And for me, for what I do, I think because I'm running multiple battery banks, which a lot of people don't do, it has been a real boon and really useful. So this is just yet another cunning circuit, possibly for my own amusement more than anything, because there probably are simpler ways of doing this. But what I have in the B shed is I have a balanced system. So it's a 24 volt system, but it's comprised of two 12 volt upper and lower rails, and they are both charged completely separately. That means they always stay balanced to 12 volts. And I am a really strong believer in that method. It does work really, really well. Now, when I bring these backup batteries onto that circuit along with the main batteries, it'll just be a simple 24 volt connection, so that these batteries, when they're not connected to the main batteries, will just be by themselves and they need to be charged. I want to charge them from a separate solar panel system which is already installed in the shed. And the reason is because my philosophy on backup batteries is that when the weather gets poor, you don't want to be worrying about pouring current to recharge your backup batteries when your main batteries need it. The main batteries take priority. So by running them on separate solar panels, I can kind of be sure that the backup batteries aren't going to bleed power away from the charging of the main batteries. So that's why I kind of do it that way. Of course, some of the backup batteries in the A shed, of course, do run off the main 12 volt array, but the power through them is muted by using bulb resistors and stuff like that, but that's digressing. Problem here is that we have two 12 volt batteries. They are slightly different ages and different capacities, but I think they're pretty closely matched. But if I just charge them with 24 volts, they'll probably become unbalanced pretty quickly. Furthermore, as I don't have a 24 volt panel to charge them, I only have a spare 12 volt 50 watt panel installed on the roof. So what the circuit does, we're finally getting to it, is it's like a time division sharing thing where it alternately shares that panel to one battery and then to the other battery. So in other words, each battery sees the 50 watt 12 volt panel, but for only half the time. So we're spreading out the power amongst the two batteries. It's kind of like having two 25 watt solar panels installed up there, which I don't have. And yeah, why don't I just go and get two 25s and put them up there? Nah, I want to use the 50 watt that's up there because it's up there, and B, because I like building clever little circuits. And I think this one is pretty clever. Using on each channel a transistor and a diode, which is an important part of the switching, this will switch well, not galvanic isolation, but it will switch both the positive and negative poles between two 12-volt batteries that are connected in series. So it'll, go to the upper rail and the lower rail and back and forth, like that. And it does that with a simple oscillator. And the oscillator couldn't be simpler. In fact, it's this. It's this at the moment, and it's going to be this. This is just a transformer. 240 volts down to 9. And I'm basically just feeding an AC signal into the bases of these transistors. So on the positive half cycle, this transistor will be on, and on the negative half cycle, that one will be. They're a complementary pair, basically. We've got an NPN transistor. This is a BRC116, which is pretty much approximately a 2N3055. I've got plenty of those lying around. And this is a TIP 2955, which is basically like a different case version of an MJ2955. So it's a complement to the 2N3055 PNP. So as the AC voltage swings from positive to negative, it juices up each of these transistors in turn, and they do their thing connecting the solar panel to the various battery bank. Now these only take about 0.6 volts to switch on, but this is 9 volts. So what it means is it goes above that 0.6 volts really, really fast. So it's being switched on like a square wave. So we are saturating the transistors. It's like an overdrive circuit in a guitar amp. So these aren't switching a sine wave into the batteries from the solar panel, because that would be a waste of power, constantly ramping up and ramping down. It's basically a square wave. And it does work quite well as far as I've tested it with my test bulb here. Should we have a little demo? Let's see if we can connect that up. So we've got 12 volts connected now between one of the rails, this one here, the NPN transistor, the upper rail I guess would be called. It's probably actually switching the bottom battery. And this one's just spare at the moment. Nothing happens, of course, because I haven't supplied any signal to the base yet. So let's turn on the mains. There we go. And let's connect this clip here. And what do you know, the light lights up. Well, the maximum voltage this bulb could get if it was turned hard on is about 9 volts. We are running from a 12 volt supply, but all the internal resistance of these clip leads and yada yada, the cable going back to the battery bank, we get about 9 volts into this rather grunty 50 watt bulb. So when I put the meter across it now, I see 4.5 volts. But it's not really 4.5 volts, it's actually 9 volts switched on for half the time. The battery will see it as 9 volts. Now, of course, I'm using a transformer, which means I've got to feed this with the mains in order to take power out of a solar panel. Isn't that a bit of a round robin, a bit of a chicken before the egg kind of thing? Or egg before whatever, cart before the horse, that kind of shit? Yes and no, but this was a really fast way to get an oscillator, and it does have some advantages. Number one, it provides a perfectly symmetrical oscillation between positive and negative. That's important because you don't want one battery getting its lion's share of the solar panel's output. Number two, these are bipolar power transistors. They take heaps of current to drive. So if I whipped up an oscillator with, say, a 555 or some other such thing like that, I would then need to have some driver transistors to drive these, which, more development time, lots more mucking around. And because this is in fact a transformer, it means it's galvanically isolated from the input to the output, which means that I can wire this at any point in reference to ground I like without having to worry about that. And that's quite important for the way I'm driving this, so no need for opto-isolators, stuff like that. So apart from the drawback of having to supply 230 volts AC into the primary, it's got heaps of advantages for the circuit. I've always got 230 volts AC available anyway from a pure sine wave inverter. Now one thing, of course, is that I had to put a resistor in series with the transformer to stop it from, well, not so much blowing up these transistors, because these 2N3055 type transistors will take about 7 amps on the base, rather to stop blowing up the transformer, and also to stop it consuming too much current and being really inefficient. But I found that the resistor got really warm, which was okay because it was rated for it, but it meant that I was wasting a lot of power as heat, dropping voltage across it. So I thought, well, this is AC. I can just use a capacitor acting as a resistor if I get the right capacitor. Well, I did the calculations and it turned out it was going to be a pretty big capacitor, 120 microfarads. That doesn't sound big, but it has to be 120 mickeys and non-polarized. I don't want any electrolytics in here. And it's got to handle a really high ripple current. So it means it's got to be a Grundy capacitor, like a motor start cap or a fluoro light cap. So you end up with a pretty bulky cap. In fact, here's my test capacitor here. It's actually a whole lot of capacitors in parallel. These are all fluorescent light capacitors out of old fluoro fittings. And together, these weigh in at 47 microfarads as measured by my meter. So just under half the capacitance I really want. So this is running just a little bit dimmer than it ought to when I get the proper cap on there. But works well. I don't care how bulky I make things. If something is worth doing, it's worth doing large. That's what I think. If a piece of equipment does a good job and it's worth having that piece of equipment, it doesn't really matter how big it is. If it's not doing the job, then why would you want it, you know? If it's doing the job, you can find a place for it. I mean, I'm not going backpacking with this stuff, you know what I'm saying? So, anyway, I think that's enough of that for now. See my little circuit. You'll see it again once I've ironed out all the bugs. Not that there's actually that many, although feeding the half wave kind of pulsed sort of waveforms into some charge controllers might get a bit hairy, so we'll have to look at what we're going to do with that. Disconnect that. That's my bench supply now. One up from the random SLA batteries and car batteries I would normally use. I'm still using batteries, but they're the big batteries coming from the room at the back of the shed there. Yeah, so I guess that's that. Oh, one thing I want to mention too. Today also marks the 11th month. Well, it's not really his birthday, but it's the 11 months since our wee baby Denethor Seth was born in February of 2017. 11 months to the day. So one more month is actually going to be his anniversary of born day. Pretty amazing, eh? He's not wee anymore. He's still wee baby, but he's a big baby, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. Anyway, so this is this anyway. I've got to actually get going to Mavtech. I've got a Zansworld Metal show tonight, and I'm hopefully going to swap a hard drive and a computer. Wonder how that'll go. Haven't had much luck with computers lately at Mavtech. Let's hope I do today.